Hello everyone and welcome to another video. Now 7 years on and the ASUS Republic of Gamers G20 still looks fantastic. After the release of the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One in 2013, it seemed as though we saw an influx of small form factor, console killer pre-built machines. A combination of powerful components and a tiny case was guaranteed to appeal to those who wanted the gaming capabilities of a console, but the wider possibilities of a computer. The ASUS G20 was one such machine to fit that bill. Users could choose between Intel or AMD high or entry-level spec components. It all depended on how much they wanted to pay. As I sit here and write this very line of my script, I don't know exactly what's in this case either. What I do know is that this PC is more like a laptop in a PC case than a traditional desktop. It has laptop memory, a laptop optical drive, and it's powered by either one or two laptop power bricks. That's right. The best spec'd configurations need two power bricks to make sure that the graphics card is getting enough juice. What's worrying is that I only got the single 180 watt power brick and not the 230 watt one as well, meaning that whatever is inside this thing probably isn't that good. Taking the side panel off of this computer reveals a very tidy looking interior. I don't know if you can see what I mean here, but the two fans almost look like eyes, while the GPU sort of resembles a mouth. It looks like this PC has a very worried face that's staring back at me, almost as if to say, please, don't try and game on me, I beg you. As you can imagine, this isn't the most user-friendly system in the world when it comes to upgrades, but I will hopefully be bringing you an update on this later in the week. For now, we need to work out what is actually inside this system. So here we are at the desktop. This part is being recorded live here, so it's just as much of a mystery to me as it is to you guys. Opening up CPU-Z here, and this should give us an idea of the processor that's installed in this machine. Opening that, and yeah, it's a pretty old FM2 Plus socket AMD A10 CPU. Back in the day, these were absolutely fine. If we open up GPU-Z then, well, this is where things I'm sure are going to get interesting. This might take a while to load up here. Okay, so we've got an AMD Radeon R9 255. I haven't really heard of... Oh no. Oh no. GDDR3. Oh no, that is never a good sign. I'm not sure if they made a GDDR5 variant of the R9 255, but if they did, then it will certainly be better than this one. But yeah, I haven't really heard of the R9 255 or had no experience with one, I don't believe, so I guess we should probably see what this thing is capable of. At least we have 16 gigs of RAM though. So programs like Cinebench will label the A10 as a dual-core CPU because this FM2 Plus processor has two modules with 2 cores per module. I'm sure a lot of you are aware of the is it a real quad-core or 6-core or 8-core CPU argument regarding AMD's older chips. Regardless of what you want to call it, the A10 7800 was okay back in 2014, but these days it's very much meh. The i5 11400 score that you see on screen, by the way, is a single core score, so I don't want you to think that this thing comes close to an 11400, because it certainly does not. But what's worse than an A10 7800, I hear you ask? Well, it is of course that graphics card. When I first read the name of the card before noticing the whole GDDR3 part, I thought it sounded pretty good. In all fairness, it would have done alright back in the day. Everything becomes obsolete eventually, but if you had bought one of these systems 6 or 7 years ago, or any system with these specs in fact, it would have similar or better performance than the aforementioned PlayStation 4 or Xbox One in some games. Maybe not better visual quality, but considering that most games will cap to 30 FPS, this certainly could have offered more than that. 2015's GTA 5 is a good example. It will run with at least 30 frames per second at 1080p with a combination of normal and high settings, but there will be dips here and there. I believe that this ROG machine was one of the lowest spec configurations available in the G20 lineup, and higher end offerings would still be holding up much better in 2021, so perhaps we'll try and find one of those. Other, older and less demanding titles like 2013's Tomb Raider will also run with at least 30 frames per second with a mix of high and normal settings. In the case of this game, the graphics card is holding us back, but this isn't always the case. Sometimes the processor is the main cause of concern, as this too will be the limiting factor in more CPU intensive titles. Usually newer titles that can easily make use of more than 4 cores. Days Gone is perhaps the best example of this. This is a pretty well optimised game in my opinion, and it's the newest game that I tested today, but as you can see by the MSI Afterburner overlay, it has our CPU pegged at 100% usage almost all of the time. This is regardless of resolution or resolution scale. The problem with the FM2 Plus socket is that there aren't really any CPUs for it that will be able to keep up with modern games. The best chip available on that socket is probably the X4880K, and even that would be maxing out with games like this. With that said, there are still ways to squeeze decent performance out of certain titles. Fortnite recently introduced a performance mode that is ideal for lower end systems. Because of that, we are able to maintain a 60 FPS plus average using this hardware. Back in 2014, 20-year-old me would have bought this system for the same reason that 26-year-old me bought it today, because it looks cool. I guess these days there is more of a purpose behind my purchase decisions, but I do still make some bad ones, that's for sure, even if they are for purposes of entertainment. In the next video, I'm going to be handing this PC over to a local and terribly rated PC expert to see what they decide to do in terms of upgrading this machine. But until then, we'll finalise with one more game. This is Far Cry 5. I believe that the Xbox Series X version received a 60 FPS patch not long ago, so I guess that this experience is more in line with the PlayStation 4 version of the game, albeit with a lower resolution and a few more performance dips here and there. I've got to be honest, I did expect a bit more performance from this machine, even with newer games and after seeing the specs, but I guess this specific system has only stood the test of time in terms of looks and not performance. And unfortunately, I've fallen for that trap of this PC looks pretty good, so it must be good, right? Which is a pretty amateur move. But then again, I wasn't sure of the specs before I bought the system. Anyway, this isn't the end of this system, because as I mentioned before, I'll be handing it over to a couple of experts, so-called experts that I found on Facebook, and we're going to see what they do to it in terms of upgrading it. So I'm sure this will end in absolute disaster, but until then, if you enjoyed this one, leave a like on it down below, leave a dislike if you didn't, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already, and hopefully I'll see all of you in the next one.